Hey folks, we'll get started here in just a minute. If you're just joining now, be sure to let us know in the chat where you're coming from, but we'll get started with the live stream here in just a minute. We're going to take a look at an article from Newport today. We're also going to continue from last week doing some notes from Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. Hey Greg, thanks for joining today. This has been kind of a fun thing that we've been able to get to do on a weekly basis these days, is just to kind of do some notes, dig into Obsidian a little bit, just do some thinking. Hope you're doing well. And if you're not on YouTube, if you're joining via Twitter or you're watching this via LinkedIn, welcome. My name's Justin. Effective Remote Work is a place that we come together to learn to live our best lives as remote workers. Some of this is involved with thinking and note-taking and knowledge work practices. Some of this also involves productivity or just general remote work stuff. So that's kind of where we're aiming things here. Got Greg from Florida. For some reason, my chat is showing up weird on the stream. What is going on there? Something got goofy. There we go. Can I closed out all my windows accidentally there? Oh well. Yeah, so again, if you're just joining, we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Let me know where you're from here in the chat. I'm going to try to get my restream chat back up so I can see everybody talking everywhere. Whoops. Technical difficulties, right? All right, there we go. Finally got chat back up. Sorry, guys. But yeah, welcome. Again, let us know where you're at. If you haven't seen some other videos here on the channel on YouTube, we've largely focused on doing Obsidian-based content, but we're branching out here into some other areas over the next year or two here. Just trying to kind of expand the repertoire. My real passion is remote work and general productivity practices and stuff like that. And Obsidian is something that I really love too. Personally, I was finding that just there's only so much of one thing that I can do at a time. And so, yeah. So I'm trying a new audio setup today. I'm using Voicemeeter for some of the audio routing. So if music's a little too loud or a little too soft, let me know. We'll get that changed up for y'all. Let's see. Cool. Just a couple more seconds before we get going. I did just launch a video this week on the Cortex brand theme system journal. I know it's been around for a few years, but I haven't had a look at it yet. I'll be sure to put a link in the chat here in just a second, so you can take a look at that if you like to. All right. I'm actually going to do chat and restream. Apparently I have to be in the browser, don't just have the thing popped up. All right. Here's the video link for everybody. Cool. We'll do that instead. Awesome. So I'm going to pop over to my screen here. We're going to take a look at some notes. If you haven't joined us before, be sure to grab some notes, do some thinking with us. If there's a project that you haven't worked on, or if you just want to do some tweaking on your productivity system, this is a good time to do it. Just hang out, listen to some music, and do some thinking. We'll just kind of start going through some notes here. I'll do some talking as we go, and it'll be fun. As you probably guess in the title, we're looking at slow productivity. It's a concept that I know Cal Newport is developing. He's been talking a lot about it on his podcast, the Deep Questions podcast, if you haven't listened to it. I really like a lot of what Cal has to say, but I have a few bones to pick with it. I'm planning on doing another video in the near future on that. He had a riff on a recent podcast of his that I had some things I wanted to say. Good stuff that he is saying, but I have some additional opinions. But anyway, this is his, I think, most recent New Yorker article on slow productivity. I think this is pretty representative of a lot of work culture. This has been something that I think needs to change about American work culture. You know, I'm not necessarily 100% on board with a 4-day work week, though I think it's awesome if companies can do that. But giving people space, especially when knowledge work culture is so intensive, I think that's a really good thing to do. But he draws this comparison to hustle culture, which, if you followed me at all over the last few years, if you've listened to my podcast, you know that I am very much anti-hustle culture. I actually kind of, quick story here, was kind of really influenced by that probably, I think probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And there was probably a 6-8 month time where I was just hustling. I got involved in a community of people online that was really all about this, and it wasn't really all that healthy for me at all. So when I hear hustle culture, when I see hustle culture, hey, Magical Cherubim, thanks for joining. Good to see you again. But when I see hustle culture, I think it's a little, it scares me a little bit, because I've seen how it can affect people. I've seen how it can affect myself too. I'm gonna try to open my chat up here. Hold on, I'm just gonna switch views to my face, and then I'm gonna try to open chat again in a different way. There we go. That's a little less distracting. And now we're back. I have an ultra wide, a 38-inch ultra wide, and so trying to manage windows on it can be a little tricky sometimes. All right, so let's start again here. Well, what do you think, Magical Cherubim? Do you think hustle culture is especially U.S. thing? I mean, I love seeing what other people do. I mean, I work for a globally distributed company, and it seems like people around the world have a little easier time disconnecting. I know there are certain places in the world that don't, like South Korea and Japan have, and some other countries in the Asian continent and other places have difficulty disconnecting from work. But I mean, guess what's your experience being in Germany? Would love to hear that. Probably a key point here. Yeah, I'm drinking Starbucks today. So this, I think, is probably Newport's thesis on the matter here. A movement to reduce the volume of work assigned to us in the first place. Which I don't think is a bad idea. You know, especially having worked in corporate cultures before in the US and just seeing a lot of the stuff that gets thrown around to people. You know, a manager just tosses something carelessly on someone's plate and doesn't think through anything on that. So in Germany, people are used to working a lot. Things change slowly, I would say, especially in metropolitan areas. They just call it new work. Purpose becomes more important for people, I would say. Yeah, I totally agree. Purpose is a guiding factor for a lot of things. Greg McKeown's book Essentialism, I think, is a good essay on that topic. There's less stuff that I think is very powerful for people. I mean, we can pile on a lot of stuff, and I think people are actually more capable of handling heavy workloads than they realize. It's kind of reflecting on what you asked originally about thinking hustle culture being a US thing. I actually think there's a lot of things in the United States where people in the United States think this is a global problem, when in reality it's a lot of it's largely a microcosm in the United States, even though the United States is a pretty large area and a pretty heavy cultural influencer. But anyway, I think a lot of the challenge that we have with busyness in the United States comes down to identity. It comes down to how we think about ourselves and where we derive our value. I'm taking part in a seminar right now. It's actually Seth Godin's the marketing seminar. I moved over into a marketing job, surprisingly enough, but that's been an amazing resource to learn what good marketing actually looks like, not the scammy, scary stuff that you see. But one thing that came up in that seminar recently was kind of the idea of imposter syndrome, but also like tying your value as a marketer or your value as a person to the outcome, when in reality the outcome of anything that you do is largely outside of your control. And that has just gotten me to think a lot, because one of the things that I know I have struggled with in the past, but I've kind of moved out of it, is feeling like my value comes from the work that I do. If I check off enough boxes during the day, I feel good about myself. If I get enough stuff done, if I get the right things done, I feel good about myself. If I'm climbing up the career ladder, I feel good about myself. I see myself as valuable. But then when you take all of those things away, how do I feel about myself? And I think a lot of our culture here in the United States in particular, I'm not sure about elsewhere, but here in the United States, I think some of that has to do, like, if you take away those progressions or people's ability to be productive, they feel like they're completely invaluable, or like not valuable, not invaluable, but not valuable. which in my personal belief isn't true. I believe every single person has an inherent value, whether they're contributing to society or not. It's just part of who I am. And so I think seeing work in this place of having such a high emphasis in American culture and progression and this idea of the American dream, really, in a lot of ways, where we're trying to advance and get more and be more and do more and grow more, and our the people that we look up to the most are billionaires. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Tim Cook, people of that sort. Great, successful people doing amazing things in the world and in a lot of ways, but their level of success is not necessarily attainable by all people. And it's part of the reason that I have issues in the productivity space too, is because so many times you see, like I've seen happen in my YouTube feed before, where I have videos that pop up that say, hey, I did, Jeff Bezos's morning routine for the last, 30 days. Here's what happened. I mean, it's so clickbaity. And I don't think it's actually productive for people. Copying someone's routine isn't going to make you a billionaire overnight or at all. There's been some memes going around on Twitter lately where because I follow some people in the tech world because I work for a tech company, where I've seen it where people are kind of making fun of successful people in some regards, where they do all these amazing things in their routine, and this is what makes them successful. They journal every day, they meditate, they do all of these things, and then the last one is my dad ran a successful tech company. So it's like there's just so many other factors at play for people being successful than just doing the right things, working hard enough. It's a lot of relationship. It's a lot of knowing the right people. It's a lot of personality stuff too. So anyway, I'm kind of going off on a rabbit hole in this. I suppose this is the entire purpose of doing these Think With Me's, but it's just to go down some rabbit holes together. But anyway, I think a lot of it has to do with how we see ourselves in relation to our work. And yeah, that one was kind of funny to see. As we go down these rabbit holes, wow, I totally lost my train of thought there. Anyway, but if we disconnect our value from our work, I think we start to see less of an issue with burnout, less of an issue, or really less of a need for slow productivity. But yeah, some of that's boundary setting too. We need to be better at setting boundaries and saying no, and then not being afraid of the blowback. And if people blow back at us saying, well, you didn't want to do this, so then you don't get a raise or you're fired, then that's, I think we need to start seeing more of that to actually see real change, or seeing quality leaders rise up in the first place. But let's keep reading. I do agree with this. Sustainable level is extremely important. The last few years, I've kind of struggled with overworking a little bit, taking on too much, doing too much. Newport's big thesis in deep work is that we really only have a certain amount of deep work that we can do. So what are you going to do with that time? 4 hours. But yet we demand more and more out of people as time goes on. I know in the 1950s, when computers first started to become a thing and people started theorizing how is this going to change work, they thought, people are going to only be working 8 hours a week or some ridiculous number like that. But in reality, we started working more, and we just started doing different types of work. So interesting here is Newport is largely advocating for applying many basic productivity concepts at an organizational level. So he's talking about here, if you allow the individual to work more sequentially, focusing on a small number of things at a time, waiting until she's done before bringing on new obligations, the rate at which she completes tasks might actually increase. He's just really, in a lot of regards, talking about batching here, maybe on a bit broader of a perspective. I would imagine he'd probably contend it's a little bit more complex than applying basic principles to organizations, but at the same time, if you can bring something down to a principle level, you should be able to apply it at an organization that's made of people. So I'm gonna bold this here because this essentially is stating this. I know Newport in his book, World Without Email, which I haven't read, I have enough of an understanding about it, but he talks a lot about Kanban style systems, Trello, things of that sort. The whole idea behind personal Kanban is you limit the work in progress. So say like you have a backlog of 20 things, you really only have 3 at most in progress items at one time. And then as you complete those, you can move the something from the backlog or the next card on the backlog into your in progress and then work on that. A lot of what he's advocating for here is like a pull style of work assignment over push. Most managers, they get something on their plate, they need to delegate it, they push it onto your plate so that you can get it done because it's important to them that it gets done, but it's not important enough for them themselves to do it. But with a pull style work, he's talking here that there needs to be organization systems for managing work. And it's basically saying, all right, let's create a backlog. Let's organize that backlog. And then let's track to see where people are pulling, how many tasks people are working on at the moment, what's assigned to them. And then only pull a new task onto their plate, let them pull a task onto their plate when they're done with what they already have. Which makes a lot of sense, but there are also a lot of smaller tasks and smaller managerial type things that tend to work together that I'm not sure how they fit into this system that he's advocating for. Yeah, I think this is a good point here too. Whoa, not sure what happened there. The autonomy that defines the professional lives of those who toil in front of computer screens has led us into a trap of excessive work volume. We cannot escape this trap by expanding the weekend. Maybe. I think some of the idea behind companies like WildBit and others leading the charge on 4-day work weeks in the United States is to try to limit the amount of time that work is getting done, because time constraints on something force you to consider what you can get done in that time. I think that's why some people struggle with working long hours. It's not because they have so much work to do. It's actually kind of, I guess in my mind, it feels a little bit backwards, because when you put a constraint on the work that you do, you actually get through it a little bit more easily. So take what's Parkinson's law, for example. Work expands to the time allotted to it. It's kind of funny because I think Parkinson's law originates in a form of satire. I can't remember exactly for sure, but it's funny we've adopted a piece of satire, if that's true, as a business axiom that we all use in a lot of ways. But if work expands to the time allotted to it, and you don't allot time to work, then it just eats up all your time. But if you put hard guard lines on the work that you're doing, saying, hey, we're only working 32 hours a week on these days, only so much is going to get done. And I think part of the piece that Newport may be missing, again, I don't have the full picture on what he thinks on things, but one of the things that he might be missing is empathetic people leadership. He tends to be very focused in his writings and in his musings that I have read on process. Like, it all needs to be process, because people are process in a lot of regards in workplaces and things of that sort. Process is a good thing. We need process. But then a lot of these companies, including Discourse, the company that I work for, the managers actually care about people's workloads, and they check in with people. How you doing? How's your workload? Is it too much? Do we need to bring someone else on to help you with this? Or do you have not enough? So there's some of that happens in workplaces today, and they don't necessarily have slow productivity. I know somebody who works at WildBit, which is one of the forward-thinking companies on the 4-day work week. And they're not overwhelmed in the work that they do there. They're not fixing that problem. But I think probably at the core of what Newport's getting in this article is that just saying move to a 4-day work week is not a magic bullet solution that's going to solve the work world's problems. Again, as I've said before, and as it tends to come down to quite a bit, it comes down to culture. And culture is defined by leadership. And so while I think productivity and slow productivity is a really good idea, I think the real way that we're going to see change in the world, the real way that we're going to see improvement in the world, especially in the United States in regards to productivity, is through leaders who get it. And leaders who create companies, who build company cultures that value people. So that's probably one of my biggest, not disagreements, as maybe that's too, I don't know, too strong of a word, but maybe a place where I'm seeing things from a different angle than Newport. Whereas I agree with a lot of what he says, but the perspective I take is that there needs to be more empathetic people management involved in this whole process. But anyway, I'm going to remove this one from my inbox here and call that one good for now. I haven't really figured out a process, just speaking a little bit more meta now. Haven't really figured out a process for what I do with art, like things that I come to next. I used to be really, really meticulous about splitting off other notes. So for example, something like this would get turned into an individual note. I like that idea still, but there's a lot of overhead that can come with that as well. And so I've started just experimenting with progressive summarization, which I'm just taking and highlighting sections that jump out at me, and I'll come back through it again and I'll highlight other stuff, or I'll bold things that I think are super important. And then, oh, that's the other thing I probably should do here. The other thing I'm doing is linking topics. Call that related. Well, that's kind of fun. if you haven't ever done it, if you're using Obsidian, people talk about the knowledge graph as being amazing. I think the killer feature in Obsidian is the local graph view. So if you don't know how to get to it, you just go up to the little hamburger menu here, dots, and then let's see, it should be like open local graph. I usually just keep it in the sidebar over here so I can collapse it when I don't want it in the way, but then it's always there if I want to open it up and take a look at it. This is a really interesting way to dive into tangential topics or topics that are related to each other or resources that are related to each other. So you can see this one article in the center here is related to, linked to productivity, Cal Newport, deep work, and the book Time Off, which I think is heavily related to this concept of slow productivity. I've often said to myself that I think we would have a solution for workplace problems in the United States if we could combine the ideas of people like Cal Newport with those of Simon Sinek, and then this book Time Off. Like, you get those three together, I think you have a really kind of a winning combination, because you have the people empathy through the ideas of Simon Sinek, you have the healthy workplace, healthy approach to work in regards to deep work that's actually effective from Newport, and then you have this balance with Time Off from that book by John Fitch and Max Frenzel. I think there's some really good ideas in there, but it's very idealist in a lot of ways, and it does not cover all situations. But anyway, local graph. I think if you are really interested in trying to figure out how things are related in your vault, the more notes that you create and connect together on topic areas, the local graph can show you some really interesting connections that you might not have noticed before, especially if you're diligent to go back in and link related topic areas together. I don't think I've linked hustle culture in my note anymore, or vault. Burnout. You can link that topic too, because it's relevant. All right, I'm going to call it quits on that one. Get the infinite game queued up here. I'll probably just take a look at this for 5-10 minutes and then call it a day today. I know last week we got through part of it. If you're just joining, let us know where you are in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. We're just kind of hanging out and doing some notes today, doing some thinking. Hey, Drew, welcome. This is a really interesting concept in this book, by the way, if you haven't Oh, thanks, Greg. It's been really fun to do these because it gives me an intentional time to sit down and actually talk through some of the books that I have, and actually go through the notes. So, and it's fun too because then I get to talk about it. I think I mentioned this last week, but I'm such a verbal processor that a lot of times the core ideas of something come out when I'm talking about it to someone. And so being able to sit down with my no fault, show it to you, and talk through the ideas and the concepts in my head actually helps me crystallize them a little bit more, which is fun. Then let's see here. So this is an interesting concept in this book. Sinek makes the argument earlier on from this point that capitalism's original intent was to benefit the consumer, and that the leaders of companies were meant to be stewards of something bigger than themselves. But then with Milton Friedman's economic advice and business thinking in the 1980s, that changed to leaders of companies are responsible to earn money for shareholders. And so as a result, the way businesses approached doing business ultimately changed. It became more about generating revenue and hitting targets and stock prices instead of keeping the people that they seek to serve in mind in everything that they do. That's why I think a lot of us, myself included, get frustrated with decisions companies make. Yeah, so he talks about it here, Milton Friedman. Corporations started tying executive pay to short-term share price performance rather than the long-term health of the company. And anytime you start making decisions out of the short term versus the long-term perspective, you can get yourself into some trouble. I definitely don't knock on CEOs a lot of times for what they make. It's a product of the culture that we've created around business. I do appreciate Sinek's take on this though, because we can seek to change the culture around business now. Someone's got to say something, right? For something to change. Another little meta comment here. Sometimes I like to link book names or people's names, like I linked Milton Friedman's name up here. I'm linking this book here because if I encounter that in another resource at some point in the line and I highlight that title there or that link that title, then there's an automatic link that's made. I know there are backlinks or unlinked mentions in here. I don't really use those all that much. I find it more valuable to be a little bit more proactive up front and try to match them up down the road. But this is an important quote here. And again, the concept in this book is there are infinite games and finite games. And he's advocating businesses have begun playing finite games in an infinite game world. Business is an infinite game. The job is to perpetuate the game. But because we have tied CEOs' pay and compensation to short-term, almost selfish ambitions, decisions often get made that are detrimental to employees, customers, and sometimes even the world altogether. You'll notice a number of spelling errors here too, because I'm typing this out on my Kindle, and the Kindle doesn't have the best keyboard in the world. I like reading on a Kindle a lot better than on a phone or a tablet though, because of the e-ink screen. Even with the backlight on a Kindle, it's a lot more pleasant to read for me. Plus it's a nice break away from the screen, even though a lot of the behaviors that I want to, interactions that I want to make with the Kindle app are a lot easier on a phone than they are on the Kindle. Well, this actually ties a little bit to where did that article go? Oh, I misspelled it, of course. So that's tied to the article we just looked at a little bit here. Trying to get the most out of people is not really helpful. I wrote an article, or not article, but a note in my vault. It was probably over a year ago now, called "You Are Not a Factory." We'll take a look at that real quick, actually. Current productivity and business philosophy often comes with the baggage that you're essentially akin to a machine or factory. Employer puts money in and gets work out, but that's not how people work. People are much more rounded and holistic beings, and that work is not life. Work is only part of life, and we need rhythms of work and rest to stay holistically healthy. Current work culture does not like this idea, but it's 100% necessary for the emotional health of workers. I think we'll wrap up on that. Would love to take any questions too about Obsidian, productivity, or remote work. If anybody has any, feel free to pop them in the chat. But I'll just kind of hang out here for a few minutes while we wrap up the stream. I know I've got a little thing to do on the stream here because the chat is persistent, and that's okay. It's just yeah, not always the best to have it hanging up there forever. And of course, I just closed the chat again. My goodness, what am I doing today? Sorry. How do you put the local chart on the side of the screen? Great question. Let's pop back over and I'll show you. Here's something that I'll do. I'll change back to the default theme. Light theme. Man, default theme sure looks a little rough compared to the Things 3 theme. Okay, so we'll just close this out and I'll show you real quick how to do that. So you come up here to the three dots, click on it, open local graph. Opens it in a second pane, pretty typical. If you want it in one of your sidebars, all you have to do is click and drag it. So you can put it up here and have it be a tab up in this section, or you can move it below, have it its own. I like to keep it at the bottom over here. I have this note set up here similarly, but it's a consistent note that I want to have available because I am working on doing a review of my experiences with the theme system journal. So that was the video that I did this week. Link should be in the chat if you're interested in watching it if you haven't already. But yeah, so just trying to get my general sense and feelings about how I'm working with the theme system journal as I'm using it so that I can compile a reasonable review of it. Yeah, you're welcome, Greg. Back to things. Colin Eckert's theme is awesome. I really enjoy using it. I don't even see it anymore. When I log into Obsidian and use it, this is kind of just how I am used to seeing it. So I'm really enjoying it. Just is so clean. If you could really take a lot of the elements of this and make it the default Obsidian theme, I think there would be a lot of but it would just be a lot cleaner and nicer overall. But coming from an application like Discourse that I'm used to working with, it was designed kind of ugly on purpose as more of a skeleton that you could customize quite a bit. And then so if you're trying to customize something that's already heavily customized, it's really difficult to do so. Drew, no, not technically. I have a computer science degree, so I have a background in it. I did some software development for about 2 years. Not really as a software developer. I did some contract, like full stack engineering stuff on the Discourse ecosystem. And then I also did a little bit of development work as part of the Discourse team. But I was more in a customer-facing technical support role and was just kind of working on some of that as I went. But now I moved over into doing marketing. So it's a completely different career mindset shift. But I've had a gamut of roles over the last 10, 15 years. Largely customer service oriented. I did probably 8 years in IT support or IT management of some sort. And then I've had other customer service type roles. I've had, I've done things here with effective remote work where I'm doing content production, which is a lot of regards is marketing, and yeah, lots of different stuff. What I really like, though, what I really like to be able to do is just dig in and think through things and think through problems. That's kind of why I've really fallen in love with using Obsidian, is because it's kind of my space to flesh out ideas. I've always liked note-taking applications. I've always liked being able to capture stuff that I'm thinking about. But until almost 2 years now, with Roam Research and Obsidian coming, and the whole bidirectional linking stuff. Yeah, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Is Shana or Shanna. Please forgive me if I say your name incorrectly. Yeah, it's Obsidian with the theme Things 3 theme. Hey, Colin. Yeah, great work on this, dude. Also, loved your tour over on Francesco's channel. Keep productive. Thanks for sharing your stuff over there. But yeah, this is a fantastic theme. I was just saying, if you didn't catch it earlier, that Shanna. All right. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. I hate mispronouncing people's names because it's your name. Yeah, but yeah, Colin, I wanted to say nice work. And what I was saying earlier, if you didn't catch it, is like I wish that the Obsidian interface in general was styled a little more like this because it's just so clean. It makes it look like a nice modern app. So, but I also understand too that creating something a little bit more utilitarian is easier to style. But yeah, we're actually just kind of wrapping up here today. But I'm happy to take a few further questions and hang out for a little longer. Kind of went through, for anybody that wasn't on earlier, went through an article by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. And then I've kind of talked through a little bit more of the Infinite game. I'll have this stream available on the channel. There's a playlist on the front page of the channel called Live Streams. where it will be available. I don't list the streams in my YouTube feed and subscriptions feed just because it can cause weirdo stuff going on with the algorithm. But if you want to find it, it's there. I can always share a link to that playlist here too in chat, which I will. Here is the live stream playlist if you want to follow up with that in the future. Yeah, but anyway, I think what I was talking about is that I love Obsidian for the fact that I can throw notes in here and I can mash them around. I used Evernote for a number of years, and like I think Evernote's pretty cool, but just that the hierarchy and organization of it, where it's still very strictly hierarchical, you really only have notebooks and tags to organize your notes with. It just didn't quite jive with me. And as a result, that was challenging at times. I had a hard time thinking through this idea of how do I connect ideas together. But then as I experimented a couple years ago with Rome and then got into Obsidian, something clicked where I was like, oh, I can use notes to do this. Because I was also experimenting with Zettelkasten prior to that, and it just wasn't really jiving with me either. I used about every note-taking app around the block. Nothing really clicked. But this finally did. And I think it was in part the combination of understanding how to do note-taking, but then also the tool itself that brought the features to the table that I needed to actually accomplish it. And so I have no idea how many notes I have in here. I don't even know if there's a way to, I don't think you can tell in Obsidian, but as you can see, I've got a number of folders, lots of different notes. This is kind of my primary working directory here for notes that I'm taking. Good question, Colin. At this moment in time, I'm not. That was a grand experiment that it worked pretty well for a while. But I was finding that I needed some more recurrence features and things and stuff that I wasn't getting from Obsidian. And plus, actually, for a while there, I just completely didn't use anything other than just a sheet of paper or my notebook for project and task management. Right now, I'm using Todoist, and I've got a setup that I hate saying this because every time I say it, something blows up and it just doesn't work for me anymore. But at this moment in time, how I'm using Todoist is working pretty well for me. It's pretty low overhead, and I've been able to split up projects and areas and things like that are working pretty well. So I have half implemented Para, but not crazily so. I haven't gotten super invested in the whole mentality, but I love the idea of being able to split out projects and areas and seeing the difference between those two. I think that's a delineation that's helped me out in managing my workloads in Todoist a little bit better. Drew says, I tried Dendron recently because it's a VS Code extension. I'm in there all day anyway for work. Did not click for me like I thought. Now I'm back with Obsidian. Yeah, I've tried some of those other ones too. I used to be in VS Code quite a bit, and I'm not as much anymore since I'm in a marketing role. I like the idea of having things all in one place, but for me, something about Obsidian just clicked. I think the one thing that I would love to have that's to make it a little bit easier is I love using Vim. Vim's the command line text editor. I got into that when I was doing software development a little bit. And I know Obsidian has a Vim mode, but it's just not the same as using command line Vim. But I would love a way to easily interface with my Obsidian Vault via the command line and still have it sync up using Obsidian Sync and things of that sort via Vim. Just because I find it so much easier to navigate through notes with that, and the GUI implementations of Vim that I've seen, even in VS Code, just don't feel the same as running a straight up Vim implementation. Shanna says, I ended up back at Todoist so often after cycling through other options. I'd like to swap fully to Obsidian to avoid vendor lock-in, exploring plugins to help now. Yeah, I think that was kind of one of my experimentations with trying project and task management in Obsidian. I actually have a video on that if you haven't caught it. I'll put a link in the chat here. There's the link to that video. But so there's like the tasks plugin, which I think is really interesting. There's some cool things you can do with that. The Kanban plugin is also really helpful. That was one of the things in my workflow that really benefited me when I was trying to sort all of that out. But the nice part about Obsidian is that you can have a Kanban board. You can also flip that into a list view with the Kanban plugin. Or you can just have a list with headings like a normal note like you see on the screen here. And the cool thing about the tasks plugin is that you can tag a check item with a tag, and then it automatically gets sucked up into a global list that you can put together. And so it's really helpful to have that available, I think, if you're going to do any sort of task management in Obsidian. But like you, I tend to come back to a full-on task manager for some of these things, and I know the lock-in is one of the challenges of it. Because you're locked into a database with Todoist, you're on a cloud service. I used to use OmniFocus because I was primarily a Mac user. Now I'm on Windows, and so really the only majorly viable option is Todoist or TickTick, the Todoist clone, as I like to think of it, because it basically is. I do hope to do a video soon on my Todoist setup, or at least how I'm using it. I've got to figure out how I want to scrub sensitive information out of there though before I do it. But I figured out a couple of different levels of working with it that are at least working. And every single time I share it, as I mentioned, every single time I write an article or do a video on a setup that I'm working, within a week, or even a month, I'm doing something different. It's kind of frustrating because, you think you got something figured out and then you don't. But anyway, we're going to wrap up for today. Thanks everyone for joining the live stream. The plan is to continue doing these on Thursdays. Today I got a little started a little later. Next week I've got a scheduling conflict where I won't be able to do a live on Thursday. But generally around 1 p.m. Central Time or 2 p.m. Central Time is where we're going to seek to land them. I'll be posting them out there both on YouTube, Twitter, and on LinkedIn if you are connected with me in any of those places. But thanks for joining today. We're